Hi, everyone. So, there's been so much this week on immigration. And if you are literally in this world, you have learned so much about immigration, so much about the enforcement of the Trump policies, and kind of going back to what I have been telling you all about what will most likely happen, which is trying to get people out of the US and trying to skip immigration court, which is exactly what has been happening. Is the US government basically trying to skip immigration court and get people out, even defying court orders. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to be talking about green card applications, what you need to know when you are starting that process. And if you are a green card holder, we're going to be talking about that as well. What you need to be aware of, because now green card holders are not safe, right? You went through the process, you got your green card, you did it the right way. But now you that went through all that process are also having an issue. So we're going to be talking about those things today. As always, if you have a question, please put them in the comments. I am here to answer your questions, see what is going on in immigration in your neck of the woods. So feel free to ask me questions. That's what I'm here for. If you don't know me, I am attorney Lilian Chukura. I'm a US based immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system as it's changing, right? It is changing every day. What we need to watch out for changes every single day. So we just need to be prepared and know what's coming and know how to basically attack it, because it's a mess. Unfortunately, it is a mess. I was going to title this video the immigration shenanigans, but I decided not to. But it is a lot of shenanigans going on, and we're going to be talking about them. If you, again, if you pay attention to the news, I try to tune out the news as much as possible and only go on it like once or twice a day just to see the roundup of what's happened and then turn it back off, because mental health, right? Mental health. I like taking time off from the news as well. So, you have probably heard of the green card holders trying to come back to the US after short visits outside of the US. Again, this is acceptable. If you are a green card holder, you are allowed to travel outside of the US and come back in. Even, just make sure your trip is short. That was the rule, right? You have to do a short trip. USCIS or the CBP officers can question you if you are out of the US for a significant amount of time, or if you have a criminal history, or if you have court case going on. But the people that have been detained in recent weeks have not fit into those molds, right? We've had green card holder detained and had their green card taken away and put in removal proceedings because the Secretary of State says that they're enemy of the U.S. and that they are, against US foreign policy to have them remain green card holders. Now, what did the man do? He protested against the war between Israel and Hamas. That was what he did, right? So that alone has led to him being put in deportation proceedings and having his green card taken away. So when I said in the past that they are lying when they say that they are only going to go after criminals. They were lying, and we can see now that the lie is showing, right? They are going after whoever they can to try and bring up their number of the people that they are deporting, right? So when someone is in removal proceedings, they don't really count as a deportation because they have to go through the court process. But when they put someone on a plane and take them to another country, not their country of origin, right? Just take them to another country and put them in labor camps and ignore federal law, a federal judge ruling, um, yeah, that gets their deportation numbers up. And that's really what they care about. Um, and as much as we want to believe that we're living in like the rule of law, apparently we're not. So we're still grateful for the judges and the attorneys filing lawsuits and the judges that are still following the law. So that is a great thing. Now, what does that mean for you, right? What does that mean for you as a green card holder going through life? One, you want to make sure that if you are taking trips outside of the US, that you're taking very short trips. You're not staying out of the US for months at a time. Don't give them a reason to try and attack you and try to take away your green card, okay? You also want to make sure that you are, you know, depend on how public your politics are, you may want to dial it down as far as what you have on you when you're going through the airport. Um, that's really important. So one of the people that were refused entry into the U.S. was because they saw on the phone that she may have taken a picture or had a picture of Hezbollah leaders on her phone. And that alone was enough to keep her from being able to return to the US. So it's really important that you are aware of what's on your phone, you are aware of your rights when it comes to disclosing what's on your phone. Okay, really important. If you have biometric as the way to enter your phone. So Face ID, fingerprint. You do not have any privacy rights to your fingerprint or your face. Okay, no privacy rights to your fingerprint or your face. The only thing you have privacy rights to is if you have an actual code that you have to put in. The Supreme Court, right? That is law. You do not have any privacy rights to your fingerprints or your face because guess what? You're going through life, you're touching things, you're leaving your fingerprints everywhere, you're putting your face everywhere. There's cameras at airports, there's all of that. So don't let that, So basically, what I'm telling people, make sure your phone is, there's no fingerprint entry and it's not just Face ID. So you can do Face ID with a code, right? Just make sure it's a code. You do have a privacy right to, your code, but no privacy rights to your fingerprint or your face if that's what you have, okay? So that's really important. So make sure you're not staying out too long. Make sure that you are not in possession of anything that could potentially be seen as political. And then make sure that you are aware of all your history. So if you have ever had any criminal history or you've ever been arrested, even if you were not charged, you need to make sure that you are aware of everything on your record because you need to be prepared to answer for it. Okay. And if you don't know that it's there, then you can't really answer for it and that can lead to problems. So make sure you know everything that's on there. And so now let's talk about people applying for a green card, right? So there's a new policy now. So during the last administration, interviews were being waived. During this administration, their policy is that every marriage-based, every family-based green card application filed in the US should get an interview. Okay. So if you are approved without an interview, just know that's not going to be the case moving forward. So when it comes to that green card application, you do not have you will have an interview. So if you don't have an interview, that's unique moving forward. That's going to be unique moving forward. So every single case is now going to have an interview. That means that things are going to slow down. That's what that typically means. So when there's, let's say, for example, there's 100,000 family-based cases, and before they could, approve 50% of it based on paperwork and not have to like schedule time for an officer to be present in the office, have people come in and do all of that. So that's 50% that could have been approved without an interview. Now those are also going to be interviews. So that's 100,000 that now needs to be scheduled for an interview. So you can see how that will lead to a slowdown, because again, officers can only do so much. Okay, as much as we want USCIS to like move through things, when they have to do an interview, they have to take their time to do the interview, unless like it's a pretty quick interview. Okay, so imagine like the shortest interview I've had with USCIS is like 30 minutes. That's the shortest. It's 30 minutes. And the longest can range anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours. Like I've heard of people having a 4-hour interview. So if that's the case, an officer doing a 4-hour interview can only do so many interviews in a day. So that's going to lead to a slowdown. So be prepared for that. And then with the NTA memo, cases that are denied are more likely now to end up in deportation proceedings. USCIS is now being asked to make sure that when they deny a case, if the person is here, they overstayed a visa, or they're undocumented, to put them in that process and issue them a notice to appear for immigration court and start that deportation process for that case. So we are going to be seeing more people put in deportation proceedings. Again, this is not a new thing, right? This is not a new power that USCIS has. They've always had the power to put people in deportation proceedings. The only difference is before, they are very like specific on the people that they're going to definitely put in deportation proceedings. Now, anyone can be put in deportation proceedings. So that's really important to know, so that when you're filling out your application or deciding to file, that you are ready, right? You have your documentation in line, you have everything you need to file, because that's what's going to make the difference, right? So with the interview, with the NTA memo, you really want to make sure that you are ready, you understand what's at stake, and you take it very seriously, okay? Every single step of the way with your petition. All right. Oh, I see some questions. Can a person in removal detention post a cash bond or do house arrest with ankle monitor? So in order to be removed, for someone that is in detention, immigration detention, they have to be given bonds. So it's not like a regular court process. So you would need to either get a bond from ICE. So ICE will need to say, this is the amount that needs to be put up for this person to be released, or go through an immigration judge and seek bond. Depending on what the person is being detained for, there are certain situations that the person would not qualify for bond. Okay, so not every single situation qualifies for a bond. Part of the Lakin-Riley Act is making certain crimes or even being accused of certain crimes leading to mandatory detention. So if the person is subject to mandatory detention, they are not bond eligible. So, but if the person is not subject to mandatory detention and they can show that they have, they don't pose public risk to the public, that they have family connections, and they have, someone that's willing to pay the bond, then the immigration judge or ICE can choose to give them bond. But it is not a given that you will be given bond. Okay. When you go to USCIS online account and sign in, the document section where it said your upload, what is the exact cause? I click on it, I see pages from my application, but I didn't upload anything. Okay, so if you have a USCIS online account and you filed your application on paper, so you mailed in your application, USCIS does scan those in. So they're trying to go electronic. So it doesn't mean, so if you click that and you see pages from your application and you never uploaded it, that's because USCIS took your paper filing, they scanned it into their system. So now you are able to see it on your account. Okay, it does not mean that you did anything. It's just saying this is what we got from you. And typically it will say which documents that you uploaded versus which ones are just documents on file. Okay, typically it's like the .tiff documents are typically from USCIS scanning it in, not from you. So it does not, so it doesn't mean that you uploaded the documents. It's that that's the document they have on file. Unless you're saying that those documents, those pages is not part of your application that you sent in, that's a completely different thing. But if it is part of what you sent in, then that's what that is. Is that USCIS has scanned it into their system, and that's why it's showing up in your account, because your account is connected to your filings. Okay. Jay says there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in public places. So it depends. So what I was talking about with the fingerprints, and yes, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in public places. And there's also no reasonable expectations of privacy with your fingerprints, your face, because again, it's public, you're touching things unless you like always wear gloves and never touch anything and you can show that. But just know when it comes to your mind, so like things coming from your mind, you do have some expectation of privacy when it comes to the code that you're entering in, because usually your code is not something that you have made public. That's something that you're keeping to yourself and that you are not sharing with the world. Your fingerprints, your face, you are sharing those with the world. So even if you are in a public space, but let's say your laptop has a password to it, right? That's not biometrics. That's not your fingerprint and that's not your face, right? That's not voice. That's another one. You do have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Even though you're in a public space, in those particular situations, you can still have an expectation of privacy. If USCIS approves a 212 waiver for a deportable crime, can DHS/ICE try to put in deportation based on the waived crime? So it depends on what the crime is and what the person's status is, right? So it, like, yeah, it depends on what the crime is and what the, and typically USCIS would not waive a deportable. They only waive inadmissibilities. I just want to make sure that it's clear. So if you're filing for a green card in the US, right, you would be able to waive a crime if you are if it makes you inadmissible, right? Not if it makes you deportable. So I'll give you an example. So I've had a client that was admissible because they, even though they had a violation of restraining order on their record, right? They violated a restraining order. They had a conviction for violation of a restraining order. They had to file for a removal of condition, which means you need to be admissible in order to be able to do that. They were still able to get their removal of conditions approved, even though they had that issue with the violation of a restraining order, because the violation of a restraining order made them deportable, but did not make them inadmissible. So in that situation, ICE was still able to issue them a notice to appear for immigration court because they had that deportable offense. So it really depends on what the full scope of the situation is. In order to answer that question. So typically I would need to see the crime, and make a determination whether it is in fact a deportable offense or if it's just an inadmissibility issue. But if you're applying for a green card through USCIS and you're filing a waiver, it's typically for an inadmissible offense, not a deportable offense. So if it's both, you could still, it could still be an issue for you. Okay. 212H 601 still getting approved. Yes, right? USCIS is still working. Cases are still being approved. Will some cases take longer than others? Yes, right? Some cases may take longer than others, but are they still being approved? Absolutely. Cases are still being approved. Cases are still being processed. So before before you think that you are not able to apply, or whether you should apply, would it even be processed, just know those cases are still being approved. Those cases are still being processed. So it is important that you find out what you qualify for. You make sure you meet all the requirements, and if you do meet all the requirements, you go ahead and file for it. But our case is still being approved. Absolutely. Okay, we are still getting approvals. Like I mentioned last week, we were able to get a work permit expedited within a week of requesting the expedite. Like, my client already has their work permit. So it's not so even though all the craziness is going on and USCIS is becoming more of an enforcement agency, before they were an adjudication agency, they were the nice agency that gets you your green card, gets you your citizenship, your work permit. They were the nice agency. Now they're going to be doing more of enforcement, taking on more of an ICE role, and working more hand in hand with ICE. So even though that's the case, they are still doing their adjudications. Okay, they are still processing cases. They are still doing all of that. So if you qualify, then yes, definitely apply. All right. All right, let's see. So, I have a green card, but the crime was waived. Can I use the waiver for a defense? It was a CIMT. So not every single CIMT. So there's, I want to make sure this is clear. US inadmissibility rules and deportation rules are different, right? Things that make you deportable and things that make you inadmissible can be the same, but they can have differences. So when it comes to CIMTs, it depends on how many you have. Okay. It's very specific. It also depends on when it took place, and the sentence imposed. Those things matter. And unfortunately, for some people, they have more than one CIMT that may make them deportable, right? Or they have a CIMT that's also an aggravated felony deportable. But a CIMT on its own, again, need more details, right? Need more details to know if that would lead to a deportation offense. Okay. N400 interview held 120 days ago. No RFE request. No news about the case. Decision. Is that sound good? That this case can be hit by the new NTA memo. So if it is denied and if you are found to be deportable, again, if you're applying for N400 for citizenship, that means you already have permanent residency. So it is not as easy for the NTA memo to apply to you as it would apply to someone that does not have status and is trying to gain a green card. So you would need to be deportable as a permanent resident. So the rules are different. Okay, the rules that make you deportable as someone that is undocumented versus someone that has a green card are different. So a denial of an M400, unless there is something else where the office is like, okay, this person has a deportable offense. This person got their green card through fraud or misrepresentation. If that is the case, then yes, the NTA memo would apply. But if they just denied it because, maybe you didn't pass the test, that's not a NTA memo doesn't apply, right? There has to be more to it than just you didn't meet the basic requirements for a green card, for naturalization. So even if the reason that they deny it is based on good moral character, just know good moral character can mean you didn't pay, you have taxes due and you haven't paid it off. That doesn't make you deportable, right? It could mean that you had a recent case that's not closed yet, but that crime or that case does not make you deportable, so the NTA memo doesn't apply. So again, there's a lot of detail that goes into it, but the real target of the NTA memos are undocumented people, people that entered without inspection or were paroled into the US, people that entered with a visa and overstayed. Because if your visa overstay, you are deportable, right? So those are the people that will be targeted with that NTA memo. Not really green card holders applying for citizenship unless they have a crime that makes them deportable or they committed fraud or misrepresentation in getting the green card. Okay. What does CIMT mean? It means crime involving moral turpitude. So it's crimes that, goes against society, that people are just like, this is a horrible thing for someone to do. That's the non-legal way of explaining it. So crimes involving moral turpitude is basically we as a society have determined that these crimes are horrible and it goes against people in society. So therefore, this person should not be able to remain in the US if they meet this, if they have committed two or more crimes involving moral turpitude. Okay. So and then I think I missed Malik. I think, yep, I missed your question about what the requirements for a 212H waiver is. So if you qualify for a 212H waiver, because it's not a given. So so just because you have a criminal conviction, that's what the 212 waiver waives, is that the person has a criminal conviction, they want to apply for a green card, now they need a waiver in order to basically waive the fact that they have that conviction that makes them inadmissible. In order to apply for that, you need a US citizen or permanent resident spouse or parent or children. Okay, this is one of the only places where children matter when it comes to a waiver. So if it's a 601A waiver for basically being in the US without documentation, that only applies to people that have spouses and parents that are US citizens or permanent residents. But the 212H applies to people that have spouses, children, or parents that are US citizens or permanent residents. So it's one of the unique places where children, extreme hardship to children would apply. Okay. So that's the requirement, is you need to show extreme hardship. All right. And Zach, if the so typically in our office, if the M400 interview has taken place, you say it's been over 120 days since the interview, typically we do a follow-up, right? A gentle service request. Hey, the interview was completed. What's going on? What's the update? That's what we typically do at like the 120-day mark. And then depending on what response we receive, sometimes the response we receive is, oh, sorry, here's your we're going to send you the swearing in date, right? The oath ceremony date. Sometimes that's the response we get. Sometimes like, oh, we're still looking over the case. In those situations, we typically get I live in a state where the Congress people around me are great. The senators are great at helping and reaching out. They make it easy. In some places, they don't make it as easy, but luckily enough for clients that live in my state, we're able to reach out to their congressperson and get their assistance. But typically, they want to see that you have done a service request, that you have tried to reach out to USCIS on your own first, and then get the congressional assistance. Okay. So even if you pass the test, I've had cases where we did the interview and the officer just forgot about us. Okay. And it does happen. You have to remember that there's been a lot of changes for us out here dealing with immigration. So just imagine the people that are actually in there that have to deal with the changes, the new bosses, the new policies they have to follow. Things are going to fall through the cracks. And it typically happens in the first few months of each administration. So just follow up. Okay. A lot of cases after the interview is the follow up that really makes the difference. So we follow up, follow up, follow up, and then get congressional assistance. Right. But if there's no issues in the case with the congressional assistance, typically that will move things along for you. Okay. Moses, I really can't. I get what you're saying, but I really cannot give you an answer. Feel free to schedule a strategy session and send us your disposition. Okay. So feel free to schedule a strategy session. I offer a 15-minute free strategy session and a detailed consultation. They're both on the website. So if you go there, you can pick the one that works best for you. But you can send us um, the court disposition for the case. And typically in the strategy session, I would review it ahead of time and be able to give you an actual answer. Again, with your questions on here, unfortunately, I cannot give you legal advice. I can answer general questions. I can give you like, if this, then that. But I'm not really able to get into the details of your particular case because I'm not seeing any documents, right? You can tell me that, I know you're giving me more details in the comments, but without seeing the actual court disposition, I can just give you general information, unfortunately. So just keep that in mind if you're asking me questions that may be best suited for a strategy session. Go ahead and schedule that free strategy session, okay? Because it does make a difference. So you can schedule the strategy session. I am the only attorney in my office, so I am the one that you will have the strategy session with. Okay. So that's sometimes people, think that they're going to get someone else. If you call my office, you will get my assistance. Okay. But when you schedule a strategy session, you will be meeting with me, not my assistants. Okay. Not my paralegals. You'll be meeting with me specifically. So that may be, I hope that answers your questions, Zach. All right. Okay. So all the craziness going on. I think the best thing for us to all remember, right, is we need to still with everything going on, with all the craziness going on, we still need to focus on our specific issues, our specific goals, because sometimes you look at everything that's going on and you're just like, it's too much. Let me just not do anything. Okay. If I don't file anything, then I may be safe. But depending on your situation, right? You may qualify for something and you may have all the documentation in place to make that thing happen. So don't let all the craziness that's going on stop you from taking action. Okay, like I said, USCIS is still accepting applications. They are still approving applications. So don't let, the fear stop you. What you can do, right, if you are afraid to take action or you're not sure if it's the best thing for you, is schedule a consultation with an attorney. Okay, get legal professional opinions. Okay, because we get all the stuff that you guys don't get, right? Um, we talk to each other. We know when a client, an attorney, in California had a client go in and was detained or wasn't detained. Like, we talk to each other, so we know what is actually going on, who is being detained, who's not being detained. For example, I've had clients that needed to check in with ICE and were able to go in and check in with ICE and go home. Okay. I've had colleagues that had a client go to check in with ICE and was not able to go home. And what we are seeing with those is not because, the person is here. It's typically people that are, that have a final order of removal, right? They already went through immigration court. They already were ordered to be deported. Those people have to check in with ICE every single year, or however, whatever frequency ICE wants them to check in. They have to go and check in. And if you have a final order of deportation, ICE can detain you. ICE can choose to actually go through that process of deporting you. So when you hear that someone went to an ICE check-in and was detained, you need more detail. Okay, one, you have to go to your ICE check-ins. You have to go to your ICE check-ins, because if you don't go to your ICE check-ins and you were released from ICE custody, they can choose to revoke your release and basically pick you up if you don't show up. If you show up, you could go home, right? There's a possibility of you going home. If you don't show up and they pick you up, there's no possibility of you going home. They're going to hold you because you didn't follow the terms of your release. That's what they're going to say. Okay. How much should a joint sponsor make to be able to sponsor you? It depends. So it depends on their household size. I do have a video on my channel where I break down the income requirements and how to look at that. But you need to know the joint sponsor's household size and then add the person that they're going to sponsor to that household size. So the household size is the person, if they're married, their spouse, if they have children that are still dependent on them, you add those children to the household size. If they find, the best way to find out who's in their household is to look at their tax returns. So typically their tax return will have the children that they're claiming, if they have like a parent living with them. So anyone they claim on their taxes is part of their household. And then plus the person that they're also sponsoring. That will be the household size. And then from there, they need to make a certain amount of income. So depending on the household size, the higher your household size, the higher your income has to be. Okay. So really important that people understand that. It's not really about, it's not just about you know, the income, is about the household. So even if the person is making, let's say, 30,000 a year, right? Quick example. If a person is making 30,000 a year and they are single and do not have any children, they meet the income requirement, right? 30,000 a year, no children, no one else in their household. It's just them. They meet the requirements. Now, if the person is making 30,000 a year and they have one child or they have a spouse, so now their household is 2 plus you 3, that 30,000 is not enough income for them to sponsor you. So that's why I say the income is only one part of it. The household is what determines if the income is enough. Okay, so 30,000 a single person is enough to be a sponsor. 30,000 for someone that has a household size of 2 and above is not enough to be a sponsor. So I am, since we are already here, copy. I'm going to put in the comments the poverty guidelines that USCIS uses. It's actually on their website. They tell you exactly how much income someone has to have in order to sponsor someone, depending on their household size. Now, there is, except, there's a different income for someone that is in the military. There's different income requirement for people that live in Alaska and Hawaii. So just make sure you're looking at the right numbers, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in that in the comments so that you can see if you want to take a look at that poverty guidelines and see if your household, if your joint sponsor's household size and income is enough. Okay. Remember, the household size does not include you, right? The household size is, I'm sorry, the household size on the website includes you. All right. So single person and you is 2 people. That's 2 households. Single person, a spouse, and you is 3. Okay. So if it's just single person and a spouse, you may think that's a household size of 2, but remember, you have to count yourself in there because they're trying to sponsor you. So now you're part of their household. And that's the other thing I tell people that are like doing a joint sponsor, because sometimes they forget that when they are when they are a joint sponsor, that they do have some responsibilities that do not end until the person meets certain requirements. Okay, so if you're a joint sponsor, you are a joint sponsor, right? You are held responsible for that person and for if they ever, so held responsible if they ever need government assistance or actually get government assistance. All right, so I always let them know that there is times that responsibility goes away. So when the person becomes a citizen, if it's a marriage-based case, you're going to, you can apply for citizenship after 3 years of being married to a U.S. citizen. You can apply for citizenship. So, you know, that's when that responsibility goes away. If the person dies, that's the responsibility obviously goes away. If the person has 40 quarters, right? That's 10 years, right? If the person has worked and put into Social Security for 10 years, that goes away. Okay. So, really important. Joint sponsors sometimes want to know that information. So, I always talk about it because you you need to have an informed consent to be a joint sponsor. All right. So, Zach, I am putting the link to the strategy session in the chat. So feel free to click on that. So you can go ahead and schedule. I don't know why that's sent like multiple times, but I feel like everything's sent twice on Facebook, but once on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, you will only see my comments once. But yeah, you can definitely book a strategy session right on there. Apart from a joint sponsor providing their W-2s, what other supporting documents are they required to provide? Well, a joint sponsor has to prove that they are either a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, right? So legal source of income. That so W-2s, but also tax returns. Okay, so if you just send in a W-2, it just tells them that they worked and they made this amount of money, but it doesn't give them the total income. So if someone has a W-2 that says they made 50,000, but they also have a self-employment that says they lost 60,000, now their total income is negative 10,000. So in that situation, just sending in the W-2 doesn't give USCIS enough information. So that's why they require you to send in the tax returns or a tax transcript, whichever one you have available to you. They typically prefer the tax transcript because it also proves to them that you filed it with the IRS. But if you're going to send in, so typically in our office, we may not send in a W-2 unless, like, let's say the joint sponsor is married. Then we need to know how much of that total income belongs to the sponsor versus the spouse. So it's a whole it can get a little bit complex depending on how many people are in the tax returns and all of that, but you need to prove their legal status in the US. You need to prove their income. I typically like including like recent pay stubs. So if they are working, you want to include recent pay stubs to show that that income is still continuing. It's not like, oh, they filed a tax return and then they quit their job, right? This is income that is still ongoing. If they are self-employed, that's where it gets tricky, okay? Self-employed gets tricky because you can't really guess like how much the person is going to make that year. But what you can do is have projections. You can have profit and loss statements. You can have your Schedule C if you are filing self-employed. If you are filing as an S corp, you'll have your S corp filing. So you still have to show all of that. But with self-employed, you have to show more than just your tax returns. Okay, you have to show that that income is still ongoing, that you are making a certain amount every single month. So that's where the profit and loss statement comes in. That's where a statement from your accountant can come in, or bookkeeper can come in. Bank statements also help with self-employment to show that, like, no, the business is making money. We have money in here. That also helps. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. I always like talking about affidavit of support because it's one of those things that people don't really think about too much. But as an immigration lawyer, I have to obsess over tax returns and, okay, where's this income coming from? Especially like if you've ever looked at your tax return, if you only have a W-2, your W-2 income is the only thing you're going to see. But when people have, maybe they sold stocks, dividends, all those things, it really matters. Okay, it really starts mattering because if they already sold all those and they already used the money for something else, then that money is not there to be used for the person that they're sponsoring. So again, going off on a tax tangent, but I just love talking about that topic. All right. So if you have any questions, remember, go ahead and put it in the comments. More than happy to respond. I do always want to mention if you are filing a marriage-based case, you want to make sure that you are including as much evidence as you possibly can. Ooh, Malik, our minds are okay. If you qualify, oh, I'm sorry, Zeus. Zeus asked the question. I'm like, I saw someone ask about marriage-based. Okay, how much evidence is enough for a marriage-based green card? So there's no like enough. There's no ceiling, in my opinion, right? Some people will be like, oh, this many pictures, this many text messages, this many this. There's no ceiling, in my opinion, especially now with the NTA memo and the fact that USCIS is like becoming another arm of ICE. You want to load your application with relevant evidence. Okay, relevant evidence, not just evidence. It has to be relevant. So if you're including pictures, you want to make sure that you are dating the pictures, naming who is in the pictures. So that way, it's very obvious when the picture was taken, where it was taken, and who are the people in the picture if it's not just you and your spouse. Okay. So that way, it will help USCIS kind of track when the pictures were taken, how far apart, all those things. And when it comes to, excuse me, when it comes to text messages, you just have to, honestly, in my opinion, if you don't have anything else, you should have some text messages, some call logs, right? You're communicating with each other. I have submitted over 400 pages of WhatsApp chat. Yep. In a case where USCIS was like, oh, we don't think there's enough evidence here. I'm like, you know what? We sent snippets of the chat and they were still, I'm like, you know what? We're going to send all of it, all 400 pages of WhatsApp chat. Please tell me that these people are now communicating and not building a relationship here. So it's really important that you kind of figure out what is the best evidence you have. I think for me personally, the situations where I don't really push my clients for a lot of evidence is if they have children. Okay, if you have a child with your spouse, the level of evidence you need to show kind of goes down because the fact that you have children together, you're living with your children, they are relying on you and your spouse for their support is a great evidence of your relationship. Okay, that's already up here, and then everything else you're showing is just like we live together, we're raising our kids together, right? That becomes extra. Like all the other things like extra, in my opinion. But if you do not have children together, all the other things are important. They're not extra. So include as much evidence as possible. That I just sent out an email yesterday to the people on my email list. So if you're not on my email list and you want to join, just let me know. But for the people on my email list, we sent out an email yesterday basically letting them know, hey, you're going to need more evidence. Sending in your marriage certificate as evidence of your relationship is not enough. I don't like, it doesn't matter what your relationship is, right? Your relationship can be real, but just know your marriage certificate is not enough to tell USCIS that your marriage is real. It only tells them that you had a legal marriage, which is only one of the requirements for an I-130 to be approved. So you really want to put in as much evidence as possible. Okay. If you qualify for 212H, still have to prove extreme hardship. So part of the 212H waiver, so in order to qualify for the waiver, the 212H waiver, you have to prove extreme hardship. So it's not about, so 212H is the name of the waiver, but to qualify for the waiver, to meet the requirements of the waiver, you have to show extreme hardship. Okay. Again, certain things matter. You said the crime was more than 29 years ago. So in some situations, you may not have to show extreme hardship if it's been, 15 or more years. But it depends on what the crime was. Okay, it depends on what the crime was. So if the crime qualifies under 212H and you can show that it's been more than 15 years and that you can show rehabilitation. So after, let's say you committed you were convicted of one crime 29 years ago and you have not had any other incidents, typically that would be helpful in showing rehabilitation, right? If you have that issue and you know, have been active in your community, you can use that to show rehabilitation. So it really does matter the details of the person's life. But typically, if you, most people that are, coming to me about a 212H have not been in the US long enough for that to be possible. So that's different for someone that's been here for 29, for the crime that have been over 29 years. They would meet other requirements, but on a basic level you need to show extreme hardship unless the crime has been that long. Okay. Can US citizens fly to Venezuela and Cuba due to the travel ban? So US travel bans, again, typically a travel ban applies to um, a country, right? Citizens of a certain country. So it's not really more of a restriction on US citizens, right? US citizens going to Cuba already have to have special permission and meet certain requirements before they are allowed to travel to Cuba. So that's already there. And that's just because of the relationship between the US and Cuba. If that relationship changes and that's no longer a requirement, then fine, right? But a US citizen traveling to Cuba already has requirements they have to meet before they can go. And if you don't meet that requirement, and I've had people travel through another country to get to Cuba and then try to come back to the US and have issues because they didn't follow the proper requirements. So typically, if there's those requirements, you need to meet them in order to go to those countries. And so it's not even going into the country. So the country may let you in. It's basically, are you going to have an issue as a US citizen traveling to those countries, knowing that there's restrictions put on US citizens from traveling to those countries as part of US laws? Okay. So now, if the travel ban is specifically for traveling to the US, so the travel ban that is being discussed that may be coming out, I have not looked in the past hours. But if the travel ban that we are expecting to come out, either today, probably today, comes out, those are more restricting travel from to the US. So those travel bans, like the Muslim travel ban, the visa restrictions, those are more affecting people trying to get visas to the US, people trying to travel to the US, not really US citizens traveling to those countries. Now, those countries can try to retaliate and put restrictions on US citizens traveling to their country, but that didn't happen the last time, and that's probably not going to happen this time because of just the trade relationship between the US and most of those countries. Okay. I hope that was helpful. I hope I answered your question because it wasn't um, I wasn't clear, but I hope I answered it. All right. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I don't see any other questions. So thank you all so much. I truly appreciate you all joining, participating, asking questions. It is great when you all are active and participating. It just reminds me how much these mean to me, like why I show up and always ready to talk about immigration and answer your questions because there's so much going on. Like, unfortunately, there is so much going on that we have to take the time and chat about it and make sure you're getting your questions answered and all of that, because there's not enough time. Right, there's not enough time to talk about all the stuff going on. And this is just, I just like having the opportunity to answer your questions, talk to you all. If you are finding value out of this video and you're still here, please make sure to like it. It just lets people know that this is a video that they may want to take a look at, right? If you can share this video, please do. The more people we can get these information to, the better. And for those that don't know, I tend to go live every single Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I take one Friday off every single month, unless things are just a little too crazy that I'm like, I want to take the day off, but people need to know this. So in those situations, I'm here and I will be doing a live. So the plan, the plan for right now is for next week Friday to be my one Friday off this month. Now, if anything happens between now and then, that I just can't wait a whole week to talk to you all about, you'll see me next Friday. But the plan for right now is for me to take Friday off. Next week, Friday off. I have a immigration trial on Thursday, so Friday just seems like a good day to take off and just relax and recuperate from my Thursday trial. So just let me know. As always, let me know if there's any specific topic you want me to cover, either on a live video or, depending on the question or the topic. I may do it like one of my Tuesday more detailed videos on it. So please, if you do have any topics you want me to cover, DM me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Lily Legal on both of those. So facebook.com/Lily Legal, Instagram.com/Lily Legal, and then all of that should be in the description to this video as well. So just let me know in those if there are specific questions or topics you want me to cover. As always, thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you hopefully in 2 weeks, if nothing changes. If things go crazy, I will see you next week. All right. Thank you all. Bye.